Welcome back, you filthy exiles, and I guess welcome back to me. So I've been away for a couple of months, and mainly for work and other things. And anyway, it's been a bit of a write-off league for me, but I have been following what's been going on, and I am keen with the next league, and I actually already have 2 build tests that I'm going to be doing. Despite patch notes or whatever else, the same builds always tend to be played at the start of the league, and that's what this video will sort of tease out. Now, I have looked at the first 2 weeks of the last league, or this current league, 3.14, and basically worked through the numbers to determine what were the most popular 5 top most popular builds within the first 2 weeks of 3.14. Now, nerfs could be coming the way of these builds or whatever. We never know what's going to happen in the patch notes. This video is strictly just to sort of do a bit of a recap of the last league and have a look and see what people played and maybe give you some ideas of what to do in the next league. Now, I'm not really going to cover off on any builds that I played over the league. I do have another build guide coming out for a slam build. Slam builds tend to not be so great for Cyrus killing, but they tend to be pretty good for everything else. But anyway, let's get into the recap of 5 popular builds from 3.14. Okay, so the first build off the ranks here is actually the Cast on Crit Ice Nova build. Now, this actually had 11% of players playing Cyclone in this league, and in particular 39% of those players playing Cyclone by the end of the first 2 weeks had actually been playing Ice Nova. Now, what are the advantages of this build? Well, as you can see on screen, huge AoE damage, very fast depending on how you spec it up. So obviously eventually you get boots with tailwind and elusiveness and things like that, and you can really crank out some high-end clear speed. Now, it does bottleneck in relation to getting to endgame bosses and can be a little bit finicky to balance around that, but that being said, you can work through that, and that's part of the process of minning and maxing. It is a competent Delve character, it's good at Legion, it's good at pretty much everything in the game, which is probably why it had one of the highest player bases playing it, of such a high play rate at the very start of the league. Now, there are the Cyclone builds that fall into the gauze of Cyclone, but from looking at POE Ninja, more or less it was either flat Cyclone or Cyclone Cast on Crit played within the first 2 weeks, just simply off the back that they're both incredibly versatile applications of using Cyclone. And in this case, this is actually, personally, I prefer playing Cast on Crit when I run Cyclone, but each to their own. Anyway, the link to the description of this build that you can see on screen, there's a link in the description for that. And this is the first build that I'd point out from the data on POE Ninja as one of the most popular builds in the first 2 weeks of the 3.14 league. Okay, so the second build that we're going to look at here is actually going to be BladeBlast BladeFall. Now, this one, I might add, was played by the end of the second week. 9% of players had been playing this build. Why, you might be asking? Well, the damage scaling on BladeBlast BladeFall, even after being nerfed in the 3.14 patch notes to drop base damage of the skill itself, it's appearing to be an impossible skill that GGG has league on league tried to nerf over and over again. As you can see, it's just pure fucking chaos. Map clear's insane, boss killing's insane. I myself am even considering playing this next league just as an early game mechanic. Now, it does have that 1-2 punch feel to it, where it can be a bit clunky depending on which ascendancy you take. Definitely the assassin is probably one of the best ascendancies to take with this one. As you can see, it just melts bosses. Again, this is the reason why everyone plays this particular build. When you're playing early league, you just want something that you can cruise through to endgame with, and this does the trick. You can run Spellslinger variations of this. You can run Cast While Channeling or Cast While Crit variations of this. There's a whole heap of ways to play it, but quite frankly, it's from a complexity level. If we look at Ezreal's tree and this is his final endgame tree, it's just not a hard build to play at all. There's no real requirements to even have, like in this particular build, you have cluster jewels, you do use phase acrobatics and whatnot, but as an overall, it's just a really, really reliable build. Great league starter build as always. And yeah, 9% of people by the second week have been playing it. And all it really encompasses is running around, you drop BladeFall, and then you drop BladeBlast, and BladeBlast just chains and kills everything on the screen. But anyway, this is the second build that was one of the most popular builds in the first 2 weeks of the 3.14 league. Okay, so the third build is actually Burning Arrow that we're going to cover here, but it's interesting to see what people actually did in the last league with this particular playstyle, because it appears that everyone was abusing the Elementalists and was actually abusing stacking golems. So this build actually uses Primordial Change, or the I guess the heat mapped build, the primary build that was being used to utilize this in 3.14 was using the Primordial Chain, and was basically abusing the ascendancy of the Golemancer, or the Golemancing ascendancy, to stack elemental damage or increase damage from golems. Which is really bloody surprising that this is actually a functional build, but as you can see on screen, this is Ezro's build again. It's quite effective, and obviously you're also doing dot, which, you know, is hectically crazy at the start of league in particular. Now, what's really interesting is we went from bleed bow in the original league straight into using fire dot elemental as builds in 3.14. But yeah, I would say this one will likely get nerfed in the 3.15 patch notes. So there is a probability that it'll get nerfed, because it looks like it got hit pretty hard from the usage perspective. The other thing that I've not really seen commonly is the use of the Zoph's Nurture. Usually it's a trash bow that you throw away, but apparently this is the direction people took, and intelligently so. This is actually quite a fun looking build, as you can see on the screen. Can take down Cyrus, can take down all content in the game. I wish I had actually played this build in the past league, because it actually looks like a hell of a lot of fun. Anyway, this was the third most played build in the league at 6% overall play, overall player base was playing it within the first 2 weeks. Alright, so this one sort of hit a point of inevitability that this would happen, but 5% of players at the end of the first 2 weeks were actually playing Spectre-based builds. Now, the reason why that had happened, and the gameplay on the screen is actually done by K Gaming, and I'd refer anyone to her channel. She's a fantastic creator, and just is a master of playing Spectre builds. But it's really interesting because in 3.14, obviously carrying golems copped a slap from the nerf hammer, so people sort of regress back to what we had been doing before, which was playing Spectres. And funnily enough, that's what's happened in this in this league. And yeah, like obviously, you have a range of different Spectres to choose from Redemption Sentries through to Syndicate Operatives, which I would say would have been one of the most commonly played Spectre or types of Spectres. But yeah, as an overall, Spectre builds are generally incredibly tanky, incredibly sustainable. They can be a little bit more expensive to gear up, obviously, because you need to get the Spectre Gem crafts on the boots, the additional Spectre on the chest, as well as getting the right wand or scepter or whatnot for minion damage and increase minion gem level or whatnot, or Spectre Gem level. But as an overall, it's actually quite a reliable build, and in particular, extremely reliable build to get through to endgame. Now, the Spectres can be a bit of a shit show in trying to level up and get to a point where they're tanky enough, and this is usually achieved by getting the right cluster tools and things like that. The other thing that I noticed throughout looking at most of the Spectre builds is a lot of characters playing Spectres were running obviously Necromancer, but running things like Glancing Blow, which is another really good way of building sustainability on Spectre-based characters. And this is just looking at the time machine at the 2 week mark. Obviously, everyone has a different way of playing this build, whether it be life-based, whether it be ES-based. No one type of variation is stronger than the other, depending on the damage layering that you actually factor into your build. Some of these life-based builds are getting up to 7.1 thousand HP, which is quite bloody good. And looking at the gearing, it's not even using the most insane gear that you could possibly be using. It's just from having well-allocated trees and just utilizing the right gear and balancing things out. But anyway, the fourth most popular build of the league for 3.14 was the use of Spectres. I definitely advocate that. As you can see on screen, they're actually quite fun. And yeah, if you haven't played Spectres, give them a go. Let go of carrion golems. Everyone's played them. They're done. They're probably going to get nerfed again. Just let's all go back to Spectres. Alright, let's get on to the last one. Okay, so the last build that we're going to feature here from a popularity level was actually Toxic Rain at 4% at the 2-week mark of the league. Now, I can understand this considering, as you can see on screen, this is my build from a couple of leagues ago. It's incredibly powerful and scales really well. The problem is it did get hit with the nerf hammer, and what I actually saw for this particular league is a lot of people switched to playing the Raider or another variation of the Pathfinder or Deadeye build to scale it out, as opposed to using the Assassin just from the nerfs that hit the Assassin Ascendancy, the Trickster Ascendancy, which seems to be a bit of a workaround and a bit of a, let's get it working and cracking away. Now, the biggest thing with this one was obviously scaling up the right bow, getting the right quiver, getting the, I think it's Aseneth's Mark helm, can be a bit of a pain in the ass to get. There's a fair bit of very unique gearing that goes into this, but Dot really scales well on the on this particular build. And it's reliable. Now, what my understanding of how people played, or the target that people played, or objective, let's call it that, of this playstyle for this league was less so about killing bosses, as this build isn't the best boss killer in the world, but more so about just cruising around maps and doing zoom runs on delirious maps and whatnot. And that tends to be the go-to for this particular build. At least at this stage, we're talking about map farming strategies that include juicing up low tier maps and just running maps over and over again to accumulate huge amounts of currency. But that's pretty much the play style that sort of conforms into the use of this build. But if this is the build that gets your motors going, then by all means give it a crack. If you haven't played it before, it's actually an incredibly fun build. Just can be a little bit rippy from time to time, but it's incredibly fast. Great for just map clearing, great for farming, not so good for delving, not so good for bossing and things like that. But every build has its purpose at the end of the day, doesn't it? Alright, so if you're wondering where I got my data from to be able to do this video in particular, as you can see, this is actually poe.ninja. I'll put a link in the description to this particular website. I always use this for curation videos, recaps, anything like that. There tends to be, as you can see here, show passive tree heat maps depending on the builds that you choose. So you can go Cyclone, and it'll show you what the heat mapping is. So the darker the green, the more popular the build, or the more popular the pathing. Now, you can really use this to coming up with or tailoring your builds is really around just understanding how other people play the game, and then looking at the benefits and disadvantages of how you structure your builds. Now, with this particular video, as you can see, these are the stats metrics here. Now, Ice Nova is a proponent of Cyclone, and that being said, Cyclone, there are definitely uses of raw Cyclone, such as Jug. I wouldn't necessarily advocate running Jug with just Cyclone, because it's not good on its own. As you can see, 129k DPS on Cyclone is pretty bad. But anyway, this is so you can see what I am looking at when I'm making this video, and I'll put a link in the description of this. Use this time machine function. Now, you could do increments up to 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks to really see how builds are progressing. So obviously at the 4-week mark, Stormbrand kicked up, Burning Arrow went down as people started to respec into the league. Ice Nova went a little bit up, BladeBlast went down, a lot more people running Cyclone because they're running cast on crit variations of Ball Lightning and everything else in between. And then Toxic Rain dropped off, Carrying Golem started moving up. you know, this is a living, breathing data set that comes in directly from wherever they're pulling their database information from POE. But anyway, this is a really good resource to figure out what to play, what people have played, and this is how we learn league on league, what works and what doesn't work. Now, as you'll see, nobody was playing Vortex predominantly in the first 2 weeks. And that would be because of the nerfs to Vortex's AoE for 3.14, as well as, you know, other various reasons, people getting sick of the build and whatever other sorts of reasons, and even people running the new skills like Accentuate and things like that wasn't really popping off. The other thing, there's no mine builds or anything in these, you know, even the top 10, which is really interesting. But anyway, if you haven't tried this before, give it a crack, see what you think. But this is pretty much how I construct a lot of the data that I use for videos and everything else of sorts. But anyway, if you like this video, drop me a like, drop me a sub. I'm going to be coming up with I'm going to be working on a couple of different builds or build variations before we get into the next league as just ideas. Both of which are very different to what I've played in the past. I'm a bit sick of minions, so I'm moving away from running Phantasm builds as league starters. I've done a Guardian variation of the build. I've done a Necromancer variation of the build in 2 leagues in a row, so it's time to play something new and have a bit of fun with something else. I might play a Detonate Dead build or something like that, which I've got one that I'm looking at in particular that I'm really interested in. And Inquisitors tend to always be a great league starter as well if you want to go cast on crit, in particular fire skills and whatnot for that. But anyway, if you like this video, give me a like, give me a sub. I'll be making more content. I'm probably going to do a playthrough of Ruiner as well. I'm really keen to play that game before the new league starts. But yeah, until next time, bye.